Commander Jake Rivers had always prided himself on his ability to adapt to any situation. 20 years of diplomatic service across 17 different star systems had taught him to read alien customs, navigate complex protocols, and avoid the kind of cultural mishaps that could spark interstellar incidents. That confidence lasted exactly 37 minutes into his first meeting with the Valerian Empire. The massive crystalline chamber aboard the flagship Eternal Dawn hummed with ethereal music as hundreds of Valerian nobles gathered for what Jake's briefing materials had described as a ceremonial greeting. The Valerians themselves were breathtaking. Tall, graceful beings with luminescent skin that shifted between silver and blue, their movements flowing like liquid starlight. At the center of it all stood Queen Lyra, her presence commanding even among her own people. Jake had studied the protocols extensively. When Queen Lyra extended her hand, a gesture his cultural attaché assured him was equivalent to a human handshake, he grasped it firmly and spoke the traditional greeting he had memorized. The words rolled off his tongue in perfect Valerian. "I bind my fate to yours, my stars to your constellation until the last sun fades." The chamber fell silent. Every Valerian eye turned to them, and Jake felt the first flutter of unease. Queen Lyra's luminescent skin shifted from silver to deep gold, her large eyes widening in what he couldn't quite interpret. The silence stretched until one of the courtiers let out what sounded distinctly like a gasp. "Ambassador Rivers, Queen," Lyra said slowly, her voice carrying harmonics that made the crystalline walls resonate. "Do you understand what you have just declared?" Jake's mind raced through his preparation materials. The phrase was clearly marked as a formal greeting in the cultural database. "Your Majesty, I expressed the traditional welcome greeting as provided by our diplomatic corps." Another silence fell. Then Queen Lyra did something unexpected. She laughed. The sound was like crystal bells mixed with ocean waves, beautiful and utterly alien. "Your diplomatic corps," she said, "has provided you with marriage vows." The words hit Jake like a meteor strike. He had just proposed to an alien queen in front of her entire court. Worse, according to Valerian law, she had accepted by not immediately rejecting his declaration. The realization must have shown on his face because Queen Lyra's expression softened. "The ceremony is already complete," she explained gently. "In our culture, marriage requires only the public declaration of binding and acceptance through silence. You have inadvertently become my consort." Jake's training kicked in, overriding his panic. "Your Majesty, surely there's a way to annul." "There is not." Her tone carried finality. "However, this presents interesting possibilities." Over the following days, Jake learned exactly how interesting those possibilities were. The Valerian Empire had been embroiled in a complex succession crisis. 3 rival factions had been maneuvering for influence, each claiming legitimacy through ancient bloodlines. Queen Lyra's accidental marriage to a human had changed everything overnight. "Your species fascinates us," Queen Lyra explained during their first private meeting. They sat in her gardens, surrounded by plants that glowed softly in the artificial twilight. "Humans adapt. You take impossible situations and make them work." Jake was beginning to understand. "You're not upset about this accident?" "Upset?" Her skin shifted to warm amber. "Ambassador. Jake, you have given me something no Valerian could. Neutrality. None of the factions can claim you as their puppet, but more than that, you represent something our people desperately need." "What's that?" "Change." She gestured to the stars visible through the transparent dome above them. "We have been the same for millennia. Our customs, our ways, our very thoughts follow patterns set by our ancestors. But humans, you bring chaos. Creative chaos." Jake spent the next weeks learning what that meant. The Valerian Empire, for all its technological advancement and cultural sophistication, had become stagnant. Their rigid traditions and predetermined roles had created a society where innovation was rare and adaptation almost impossible. His presence changed that dynamic immediately. The marriage alliance had neutralized the succession crisis, but his suggestions began transforming how the Valerians approached problems. When their agricultural worlds faced crop failures due to solar radiation changes, Jake proposed solutions based on human agricultural techniques. When trade negotiations with the neighboring Kronos Republic stalled over ceremonial precedents, he suggested practical compromises that had never occurred to the Valerian negotiators.
"You think differently," Queen Lyra observed one evening as they reviewed reports of successful policy implementations. "Where we see impossible barriers, you see puzzles to solve." Jake was beginning to understand why humanity had thrived despite
being one of the youngest species in the galaxy. Humans didn't just adapt to circumstances, they adapted circumstances to themselves. They took existing systems and rebuilt them to work better. The changes rippled outward. Young Valerians began questioning traditions, proposing new ideas, challenging assumptions that had gone unexamined for centuries. The Empire's technological development, stagnant for millennia, suddenly leaped forward as researchers began combining human ingenuity with Valerian resources. 6 months after the accidental ceremony, Jake stood in the same crystalline chamber where it had all begun. This time he knew exactly what he was saying as he addressed the assembled Valerian nobility. "The marriage that brought us together by accident has become something chosen," he declared in flawless Valerian. "Not because of duty or politics, but because we have discovered something remarkable together. Growth." Queen Lyra's skin blazed with golden light as she responded. "The human who disrupted our world has shown us that disruption can be creation. That change can be chosen rather than feared." The formal announcement of their renewed vows, this time intentional, marked more than a personal milestone. It represented the beginning of a new era for the Valerian Empire. Trade agreements with dozens of species followed human-inspired negotiation protocols. Scientific research exploded with cross-cultural collaboration. Art and literature flourished as Valerian creativity, freed from ancient constraints, soared to new heights. Jake often reflected on the irony. He had been sent to establish formal diplomatic relations with a powerful alien empire. Instead, he had accidentally married their queen and become the catalyst for the greatest cultural transformation in Valerian history. "Do you ever regret it?" Queen Lyra asked him one day, as they watched the launch of the first joint human-Valerian deep space exploration vessel. Jake considered the question seriously. His life had taken a turn he could never have imagined. He was married to an alien queen, helping govern an empire of billions, and his every decision affected the fate of entire star systems. It was nothing like the quiet diplomatic career he had planned. "Never," he said finally. "Sometimes the best changes are the ones we never see coming." Queen Lyra's laughter rang out across the starport, harmonizing with the roar of departing spacecraft. In the distance, human and Valerian crews worked together, their combined efforts reaching toward stars that suddenly seemed much closer than before. The accident that should have ended his career had instead begun something magnificent. Nothing was the same again, and Jake Rivers couldn't have been happier about it.